We were talking about January. We'll move on to the next topic, and we were talking about what we need in January. And there's been a lot of talk about from fans anyway, looking at a potential new striker. Obviously, there's been a few reports like Tottenham looking at Tony and Solanke, whether that be true or not, I don't know. But what I guess the question is for the next topic. Is a striker one of the priorities in January in your opinion? We've got two strikers at the moment, two players playing the number 9 at the moment, in Son and Richarlison. Obviously, Richarlison has picked up his form last 3 games, 4 goals in the last 3 games. He's now got 5 all season. Son is the second top goal scorer in the Premier League with 11 Premier League goals. But a lot of people do feel with this team, if we did have, there's been a few games, haven't there, where we've just missed loads of chances, and if we were a bit more clinical, we definitely would have won those games. Oh, Josh has seemed to have dropped out. Was back in, there he is. So what I was going to say is a lot of fans feel that a striker should be one of our priorities, and that should be something we do look to bring in as maybe after a centre-back as one of our main priorities. I'll go to you first, Brian. For you, do we need to sign a number 9 this January?
For me, it's kind of like when you get a bonus track on a CD or bonus features on a DVD. It's not the main necessity. We all centre-back, without a question of a doubt. I would say a winger, without a doubt. Depending on what Reguilon, if he stays or goes, we need cover for Destiny. I would say, and I hate using these words because someone uses these words, if an opportunity arises, then we go and take it. I think there are bigger things that we need to address before we do that. So if one comes about, I would love, like this Dominic Solanke one. I love that link. Love it. I think he's come on. He's shown this season he can do it. Another one that I don't know how much it costs, but I rate him is Archer from Sheffield United. Really, really rate that kid. I don't want us to be going and blowing a huge amount of money on a striker when the centre back is everything to me. That is the thing that you need to see through the door straight away. So for me, a striker, if it becomes available, but it shouldn't be on the agenda.
What do you feel, Si? Do you feel the club? We will be looking at the situation and we'll be feeling we should be spending big on a striker this January, and if we do, we really put ourselves in an unbelievable position. Or do you feel we've got 2 number 9s right now who both, when they do play in that position, they are scoring? So is there a massive need to go big and splash big on a striker?
I think that it will be a balancing act for them in the sense that the purchase, kind of to Brian's point, is not wasting money. It has to be done in a long run vision, not just to be like, oh, we just need someone to fill the gap for a month or so, because then that player or the players that are missing have to then be cohesive for the rest of the season and beyond that. So there's an argument to say that who's your starting lineup, and then if you're bringing in a decent striker, one that's used to playing every week and this, that, and the other. Granted, if it's a club that's coming, no disrespect, from a lower club to Spurs, they might have a bit more lenience in their mind to want to be able to sit on a bench a bit more and be happy in that instance. But 9 times out of 10, it's very difficult to find a striker where they were playing consistently, or you're buying them because they've scored a lot of goals because they play all the time, to then potentially going back to a bench momentum. In that instance, because what our starting 11 is always going to be, and the fact that the 3 players typically up front right now, with the exception maybe of Johnson, all 3 or 4 of those attacking players can play in each of those positions. So we have a massive advantage there. So it's going to be a bit of a difficult to bring in someone of a top level, because they'll know the score as well of, in a month and a half's time when these players come back, or one player in particular comes back, where am I going to be sitting in this team? So I do think we have to be a bit more conscious and sensible in purchasing a striker in this period of time. And I think that's probably why they did bring Veliz in, because he's a target man. We don't know much about him at all because we haven't really seen him playing. He's playing fairly decently in the academy performances, but at the end of the day, he's arguably, from what we've seen, not good enough or strong enough yet to position himself as a top striker or someone that can replace the likes of Son for this month and a half. So that I'm sure they've balanced this in their minds, but equally, we know Tottenham's history in the transfer market. They're not just going to go and buy someone necessarily that might be a lie actually, but they do tend to buy players predominantly that they don't want to just waste money on moving forward. So
no, but just to reiterate the point, is it, regardless of whether we need to be smart about buying a striker, is it a position for you that we need to address like right now?
That's what I mean. I don't personally think it is, because of the players that we got there. And exactly to my other point, that if you bring in a striker, you then got that cohesive issue of who's actually going to be playing in 2 months' time. So we're literally talking about four, maybe 5 games here, which is not massive. It's all condensed within a month anyway, and making like decisions that are that big for that amount of games is not possible. If there's an argument to say you bring in a striker because we think we're going to go and try and win the title, or we need it for top 4, that's another conversation. But again, I don't think we need that, because we have 3 or 4 players immediately there. Let's take Son out of the equation for this month. You got 3 players that can play in either of those 3 positions if you wanted them to. We've seen how Richarlison's effective on the wing, whether people like it or not. He's a good player, and he's been effective up front after his operation, which is fantastic to see. Ticks the box on both of them. We know Kulu can play in both of those positions. Johnson, as I said, is the only question mark, because I've only really seen him on the wing. Don't anticipate him to be essential, but you don't need him to be if you've got the other 2 anyway. And you have Veliz, you have Lo Celso, really, if you really need to bring someone in, and then all of a sudden you've got Maddison back. So I think it's a complete waste of time to get him in January. The only way it worked last year is because we got Richarlison at that price and that opportunity arose in that January period, and we arguably needed a player that could play in 2 different positions. And we fast forward to this season, we see the reason why that happened in the first place, because now you've got 3 players, including Son, that can play in all of them. So I don't think we need one.
Fair enough. What do you think, Josh? Do you think a striker is a position that really needs addressing in January if we're really going to achieve our goals this season? Or do you think, is there anything to really be worried about when you've got the second top goal scorer in the league and you've got a player in form like Richarlison?
I'd say no. Definitely. Like, the thing is, striker's such an exciting position that you'll always get excited. If, like, say I was getting excited about Gift Orban last summer and all those players like that, because it's someone that comes in and scores goals. So I'd probably spin it if one did come in that was exciting, and I'd probably say, oh yeah, we needed this and all that. But we don't. Like, we've got 2 players. I don't think you could honestly find a better striker on the market that is even possible to come to Spurs than Son for this system, and then Richie for when we're playing like low blocks and stuff like that. Like, I honestly think against the big boys, Son would perform better than most strikers in the world. And then against teams that sit back, Richie does everything you need. He's got a bit of pace. He's good in the air. He's strong. He gets about like, and I've been one of Richie's biggest doubters. But he has just looked totally different since he came back from this surgery. And it's not just the goals. He really does look different. So, yeah, I would not. We were having this discussion before. People are talking about Tony and stuff. I wouldn't bother. I'd go and get a left winger.
One. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, just 1v1 guy, I was going to say. But yeah.
Yeah, I agree, because I think one of the problems we do sometimes have is when Son has been playing up front, and now with the injuries to Solomon and Perisic, there is a bit of a problem on the left. Because I feel like Johnson isn't the best in that position. He's not as well. I would say he doesn't look as comfortable there as he does when he's on the right, or as effective when he's getting in behind. Doesn't seem to be getting in as good a position as he does when he's on the right-hand side. And when he gets in those positions, he just looks a lot more decisive when he's on that right-hand side. He knows what he's doing. And so there is a bit of a problem when we do want to play Son up front. You could play Rishi there. He's okay, but I just don't think in this kind of system he's perfect for that role, because I just don't think he's much of a creative force. Like, he doesn't set chances up for his teammates that much. And then obviously we've got long-term injuries to Solomon and Perisic. So I think there is a gap there. But I think when it just look purely at that number 9 position, like I do think the guys right now who are stepping in, whether it be Richarlison or Son, are doing quite a good job. So I don't see the need to be worried about that. Like when you've got, it's just weird to hear people calling for a striker, saying it's like we massively need it when we've got the second top goal scorer in the league right now, playing in that position. And we all know how clinical someone like Son is in that position. But it's also weird to think about, this conversation when you take into context what happened in the summer and selling Harry Kane, and now we're 6 months later and we didn't obviously sign a striker to replace him, and we've got that money for Kane and the goal scorer he is, and now we're talking about 6 months. Do we even need to sign someone to replace him? So I understand maybe that psychologically is still thinking, well, we haven't replaced Harry Kane yet, so we definitely need a proper goal scorer to fill his boots. And there have been games this season where if we were more clinical, that definitely we would have won those games a lot more comfortably. We would have had more points. But I just feel like, I think if you're looking at in a real ideal world, like if it was Football Manager and we could do whatever we wanted in this window, would I sign a striker to help support the attack, like a proper good number 9 that could potentially improve what we have? Yeah, I would probably in an ideal world maybe look at someone who's maybe a bit better than Richarlison or whatever. But obviously, football's not Football Manager. It's this is reality. And when you've got a good player, a £60 million striker, Richarlison in good form, and you've got the second top goal scorer in the league in Son, are we realistically going to go and splash 60-70 million on another striker when we've got players banging goals? I just don't see that happening.
Tim, you know what we need? We need a player that I've missed at Tottenham, especially in this style of play. And we talk about it with Perisic when he would be ideal for Richarlison. We need to find an old-fashioned Chrissy Waddle. Chrissy Waddle in this team, if we had a Chris Waddle in his pomp, my God, we need a left winger or a winger that will take a player on, put a cross in, will find its man, like Perisic was doing. If we could have had a 1988-89 season, or sorry, 87-88-89 season Chrissy Waddle in this team, my good God, that would be the missing piece in the jigsaw for me. That's what we need, especially with Richarlison hitting the goals. We need to find someone to use. We saw his aerial ability for the goal for Notts Forest. We saw it with Sheffield United. If we can get those balls into him, my God, that's how important a winger is. I'll back in 1 second.
That's all right. Yeah, I think you make a good point, Brian. I think in a weird way, our system kind of values kind of old-fashioned kind of wingers, players on their strong foot on the outside, like proper Barclays of like the mid-2000s, like how we used to have Lennon on the right, Bale on the left.
Yeah,
that's like exactly what we want to do with our wingers in a weird way, isn't it?
Do you know what though? On that, I think that's what works best right now, because the wingers we have aren't able to do that when they're inverted. But the ideal to actually be like one of the best teams in Europe or something like that, like we need those players that can do that inverted, like so that they can also be a big goal threat as well. Because if it's just Son or Richarlison in the middle waiting for the cutbacks, we're not going to be at optimum levels. Personally, that's what I think. Not that I haven't got any amazing insight to what Ange is thinking, but I just think that Doku or like just elite level winger that can go inside and out on both sides, which I'm not sure on Johnson long term. We'll see. Do you know what I mean? We'll see. But that is what's going to take us to optimum levels. I think we need a winger that can do equally inside and out. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree with that. I feel like in a real perfect system, what Ange really wants is someone who has equal threat going both ways, essentially. I feel like the problems we have is when Kulusevski's on the right-hand side, he's obviously decent at cutting inside, but he doesn't seem to want to go on the outside too much on that front. So he doesn't have enough threat on the outside. When Johnson's inverted on the left, he does cut inside, but I feel like his goal threat isn't as good as when he's maybe on the right-hand side. When he's on the left, when he goes down the outside, when he's on the left, his left foot isn't unbelievable, I feel, especially when crossing wise. So but he's still a threat when he's running at you, Johnson, when he's on that left-hand side, but he's just doesn't seem effective when he gets into those positions as much as he is on the right. So I do think we do have some issues with those wingers when it comes to just being that threat going both ways at the moment. But I feel like when Johnson's on the right, even when he cuts inside, he kind of cuts inside and get it back on his right foot, and he's still a pretty good threat. And obviously when he goes on the outside, he's a massive threat. So that's pretty decent. And then I just feel like at the moment Kulu's looking a bit better in the centre. So they're just a bit of a problem on the left. Obviously, we do have Son who can play there, and he's doing quite well. And I actually think Son is one of those probably players. I think Son, so it's a bit frustrating though, like Son of 5 years ago would have been perfect, like for this on that left-hand side. Like he would have been just a bit more relentless, a bit more energy with his pace. And I think obviously because he's so two-footed, he can go either way, isn't he, and be as effective. Do you think for the time being, having him there though is best for the system, Josh? Especially with Richarlison on form.
Well, look, this is what I will say is that it did look that way against Newcastle, and we can't really move Richarlison because he's doing so well. But in the last 2 games, I don't know if Son has looked great out wide. Do you know what I mean? So it's a tough one. It's a tough one. Son has to play. For me, he's still my number 1 striker. He really is. Until Richie's done it consistently for like 10, 15 games. So, yeah, I think in a dream world, for me, I would have Richie as an amazing bench option, Son up top, and a new tricky left winger. Or I'm starting to think like if Kulu's just going to move around a lot and Johnson, I'm not saying he's been bad at all. I love Johnson, by the way, and I think he's going to be brilliant in the future.
Yep.
But if Johnson isn't like world-class elite yet on the right or left, then maybe we could sign a right winger that does the same thing. I don't know. And say to Johnson, look, over the summer, get better on the left because we want our wingers inverted. And you should be playing on the left. So, you know, get better at it. Do you know what I mean?
I guess a lot of our decision making in terms of obviously there are rumours as well. We want to sign a kind of a versatile forward who can play out wide and fill in up front as well. I think that would be a good compromise. But obviously, a lot of our decisions into what kind of specialised position the forward line will kind of depend on where we truly see Son's future. Is it truly as a striker going forward, or is it going to be do we see him as a player who's going to be consistently playing out wide for the foreseeable, and is that where his future lies? I for one thing I do think it's up front. I think is at this stage of his career is where he's most effective, but obviously he has been filling in back on the left in recent weeks with with mixed results, I would say, but some good. So still got 2 assists and a goal against Newcastle and did get a goal against Everton. So in terms of like goal contributions, still doing well. So maybe, Andrew would say, I still think he's a very good left winger. But for me, I still see his long-term future as a striker, even though he's playing really well on the left at the moment. What do you reckon, Brian?
I think overall, I'm going to go back to what Josh said about with teams low block Richie and teams with space, you give it to him. I think what we've got to look at as well, for the first time in a little while, we're playing players actually in their preferred positions or positions they can definitely, because normally we've just put, Richarlison, you go out on the left and do what you do. Oh no, wait a minute, Johnson will put you on the left. It's kind of been just a square peg in round hole and fill places. I think what we've seen with Newcastle and with Everton is we had a right winger on the right. We had Son who can play there very, very well and has done very, very well in the last couple of games. Richie in his preferred position, and Kulu playing in this new position where he's obviously shown much better form and much more positivity than he's been doing when he's stuck out on the right. So for the first time in a while, I think we're playing our four main attackers in their preferred positions where they can. And it makes such a difference when you've got 4 players playing in, right, this is where I want to play, this is where I can damage, this is where I can have an influence and an impact, compared to, right, he's injured, so we're putting you there, then you're injured, so we're putting you here. I think having those 4 there that can all do their jobs admirably, and it's showing it. You see a difference in Richarlison, injury-free and whatever he was dealing with personally. He's either dealt with or still dealing with it, but it's having an impact if he's still getting it. Johnson was brilliant for for Forest on the right. And all this Johnson talk at the moment about, oh, he's not good enough for the price. You look at it, this guy came in on the last day of the window, had to get up to Angie's fitness requirements, Angie's understanding of how he wants the game played in his role, has had 2 injuries. And I still think there's a huge expectancy difference from Nottingham Forest to Tottenham Hotspur, like it or not. And I think he's just finding his rhythm. And obviously, Brennan Johnson was the star man for Forest. He was the pivotal one that if he lost the ball or did something, he was the talisman. Well, he's not here. And when he gets up to scratch, I think we've got one hell of a player on our team. But on the right, he's looked good. And like I said, going back to the original part of this question, having 4 players playing positions they can all play very, very well, rather than just being put there to plug holes, has made a big difference.